Mi amigo,
Hola.
¿cómo estás?
Bien, ¿y cómo estás usted, amiga?
Bien, gracias. How's your sculpture coming along?
Yeah, it's getting there. I'm just about ready to. Well, I'm still sanding a little bit, getting some of the the little scratches and that out of it, and I'm almost ready to polish it, or water sandpaper, I should say. And yeah, so it's just about done, Thank goodness.
What is the title of this piece?
Emotion in motion. And
What kind of stone is that?
this is a pink alabaster. It's a fairly soft stone. It's nice to work with. It's just beautiful stone, I really like it.
Do you know where it came from?
I think it came from,
Maybe Utah?
I think Utah, yes.
I don't think it's Italian.
No, it's not Italian alabaster. Real nice,
How long have you been working on this?
Whew, boy, that's a good one, too. That's a good question there. I would say that perhaps I've worked on it for about 7 months. About 7 months altogether. You'd be working on one and then working on another piece, and then you kind of go back to the other one and back and forth. Kind of keeps you from being too repetitious on just one sculpture.
But you started this a long time ago, didn't you?
Yes, I did. Matter of fact, yeah. I finally, coming to the point that I'm finishing it. It isn't that I haven't done any other sculptures other than this one, but I've done a lot of other ones also in this, and then I came back to this one, kind of put the finishing touches on it.
Right, and you'll be taking this to an art center gallery.
Yeah.
To put on exhibit.
On exhibit, right. Exactly.
And hopefully we'll sell it.
Yeah, hopefully.
That's what you want to do.
Yeah, I would, yeah. Kind of got to make room for the new stuff, And
yeah, space can be a problem.
Yeah, it sure can, yeah. But it's good to keep, you have them, you get your own personal satisfaction. Well, my personal satisfaction came from an idea in my head and then making it tangible and then, putting the final touches on it. And that's my say. It's not always the end or it's the destination, the process where I get a lot of the satisfaction from. I say, I remember when this was just a thought, and then it becomes tangible. And of course you share that with other people. And it's an incredible journey. Each sculpture is an incredible journey. It's all part of that one puzzle, putting the pieces of the puzzle together, which has to do with, for me, it was a metaphysical journey. Yeah, I've been a sculptor about 35 years.
And I really enjoyed the story about, your friend Jim, what was his name?
Jim Tafoya.
Who turned you on to sculpture.
Yes.
And you told us about, how you were marketing your work from, early on.
Yeah.
And how then Governor Brown bought some of your pieces.
Bought a couple pieces.
That was really interesting.
Thank you.
You had told me a long time ago something about you were involved in exchanges during this period.
Well, I used to barter with people. Say, for instance, the artist has to exist some way, and in the process, I found people I would barter with who I would barter a certain sculpture they would like, and I would buy my grocery that way. I would get meat, I would get coffee, and all the other little items that people need to survive with, or on, I should say. And so I did that for quite a number of years. And I used to give a lot of my sculptures away too, Like I remember in Sacramento, California, I participated in what they call Art in Action. And actually people passing through the fair, and I'll be working on a piece I was carving soapstone because it's pretty easy to work on.
You mean the Sacramento Fair?
The Sacramento State Fair, yeah. And it was called Art in Action. So I would make have pieces or pieces that are partially done and finished there in order to educate the people that were coming through the fair to see what some of the process that an artist goes through in order to create a sculpture. And I remember this particular situation one time where an elderly lady came in and she tells me, "Oh, I love this." I had made sort of a totem pole. And she said, "I love that so much." It was a short one, a small one, from here to the ground.
Is this out of wood?
It was out of wood, yeah. And she said she loved it, but that she didn't have the money, And I was so touched by her sincerity and just her niceness, And I said, "You know what? If you could move that sculpture," and it didn't really weigh that much. I said, "You could have it. I'll put it in your car." And so, see, I saw her and she was struggling with it. She was about 80-something years old. And she was so sweet, so nice, And I said, "You know what? My heart told me give it to her." And so I said, she went and tried to move, and of course it didn't weigh that much, but it was too much for her to move. And I told her, "You got it." And so I had a dolly there, and I loaded the little totem onto the dolly, and she had a car in the back. And I went back there, and there it was, and I unloaded it for her. I put it into her trunk. It was that small. And she was just so delighted, She was so happy. And just to see the smile on her face and the twinkling in her eye meant everything in the world to me, So I told her you could have it, And I'd be carving things and like out of soapstone. I remember I used to do a lot of animals. And I did this turtle. It was partially still in the stone in the rough. And then the legs and part of the shell and the head and a fin was up, was finished and everything. And it was kind of like sticking out of the stone, so it was partially like a metamorphosis, And someone said, I like to buy that. How much you want for it? I said, "Well, give me $100, And it perhaps was worth about $200 or $300, if not $400. And I let them, and I was giving a lot, and then I know that when it came time to buy food or pay the rent, I didn't have too much money. And something said to me, "You know what? You got to stop playing Santa Claus for the people if you expect to pay your rent, And my God, so that's what I did. But I used to just love giving them away. I figured people loved them so much. I just wanted to share, But I got to that point. I said, "Hey," but I wouldn't charge them too much. I'd charge them maybe $400 or $500 for something. Maybe it's worth $800, and so on like that. And then gradually I got smarter as I went along. Not smarter, but I mean, I became more disciplined in saving my money to pay the rent and get the necessities and the material that I need in order to continue creating and what have you.
This period of time, this was a real positive, uplifting period for you when you were turning your whole life around.
Oh, totally, yeah.
Jim was a very powerful influence on you.
Yes, he was, yeah. I was able to, I like what he was doing. As I mentioned before, he was a guy that had been through a lot of changes himself in life. And I was able to identify with him in a lot, even though the situations were different. But basically the pain was the same. And then I learned, how to get my act together, and of course with friends' help, with my friends' help that I met along the way. And it was very important. It was a very critical time in my life. I was starting to evolve, but I had to be able to know in what direction I wanted to evolve in.
So you were around 30-ish?
I turned 30, when I was my first introduction to art. By Jim Tafoya. And even though I taught myself, as I mentioned, Jim liked what I did, so he turned me on. He turned Herb on to me, Herb Puffer, that is. and
And
bingo.
then Herb connected you to then Governor Brown.
Yeah, to Governor Brown. Well, as I mentioned, he invited me to put some of my pieces into his gallery. He was a Native American collector and a Democratic fundraiser. And I didn't know that. I didn't even know what it meant, you know. And yeah.
Oh, that's how you sold your pieces, by having them on exhibit in a gallery.
Yeah, that was one of the ways. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And at the Sacramento State Fair, as I mentioned, that's how it all began.
Oh.
You know, and I said, "Oh my God, what a wonderful way to move your sculptures, but also what a beautiful way it was to have art as a vehicle to express a lot of emotions and feelings, and then most of all, I think the most important part of that was the very fact that it was an introduction metaphysically to my higher self, spiritually. You know, it wasn't only about making the money, getting some notoriety and so on, which helps, of course, you know, because you're in the business of selling sculptures to pay the rent. You don't have to go to the butcher and get chiseled out of your sculpture by getting less than what it really was worth. And but they were good butchers too, mind you. The spiritual aspect of it, for me, it was incredible. You know, it helped me find myself, pieces of myself, like pieces of the puzzle. You know, and I started getting a good sense of what I was about and what my mission was about in life.
You talked about, the California Arts Council and, your program. You founded this very interesting, this very innovative program in California, which was funded by the California Arts Council.
Yes, it was.
It was sponsored by this organization called Occur.
Occur, yeah. It was the watchdog organization of the city. And see that an equal amount of minority people, or say minority people, would be hired in the rebuilding of buildings and the jobs angle and so on like that in Oakland, California. Yeah, I was very fortunate that people felt that maybe this guy right here probably had something to say, you know. And not only something to say, not only there's many people got things to say, but I was fortunate enough that people took interest and that I had developed this program for the visually impaired. But not only for them, I had integrated workshops, sighted with the so-called non-sighted. I've taught in a lot of various different disabled places and set up workshops and what have you. And also I had workshops where it was integrated, as I was mentioning, with the sighted, and that the blind, the ones that were more in advance in the class and so on like that, would teach the sighted how to carve. So it wasn't anymore the old saying of the blind leading the blind, but the blind leading the sighted. I was always invited to participate in a lot of places that had disabled people and so-called visually capable people to come and participate and be part of the workshop. And since I had these innovative techniques and what have you that had developed over the years, a lot of years, they would invite me and I would teach them. And we would, enter a lot of these students into the county fair, which was sort of a first for the county fair.
The Alameda County Fair.
The Alameda County Fair, because the visually impaired would get there and enter their sculpture and so on like this. And when they judged it, they didn't know who was the visually impaired and who was the sighted. And so it was done in that way. And a few of my students, I won second and third, and one of my students won first place for numerous years. And this was the first for the county fair that a visually impaired person competing would win successively so many times and every year against a sighted sculptor. But this person was very, some people get it, they're talented.
What was her name again?
Virginia Wilson. Yeah.
Right.
And she was one of my #1 students, and there were others too. And they won second and third and so on like this. And then they would also teach the sighted, like the young kids and so on like this. And that was a very important breakthrough right there, rather than saying, this is only reserved for the sighted. Now they could say that it's also reserved for the non-sighted. And so that created quite a stir, and I got a lot of front page coverage from various different...
Berkeley Gazette.
Yeah.
The International Sculpture Conference. That was a first.
Yeah, that was the
dealing
first
with,
too.
The issues of art and disability.
And disability, yeah.
How do you feel about all the recognition that you did receive in California?
It helped to clarify a lot of things of, everybody asks, what's my direction in life? What is it that really satisfies me, And I've always considered myself to be the people's artist. I didn't, I never played the art game or what have you like this,
In what way?
I've always put myself on the same level as other people. I got notoriety, and that was very important because I felt that I had a message. I've always had a message. I've always had a lot to say. I just needed a vehicle to be able and have the opportunity to express that. And art provided that. And all the other things were just blessings, and I'm very humbly thankful, because it helped me in my own personal life. I learned a lot, and I grew a lot within, and to reach out to other people, that's very important, I just didn't go on my own way and say, look at me, how wonderful I am, but how wonderful we all are. That's what's important. That's my message, and that always has been my message, and because, hey, there by the grace of God, in whatever situation people, there go I. And I've never thought that, we're all in this boat together, and that's the thing. The very fact is that I got exposure. And people want to know about me. Where did I learn art? How did I learn it? Did I go to school? Or what have you like that. And I couldn't afford it at the time when I was younger. I was just trying to make ends meet and what have you and so forth. And but it definitely gave me exposure because people took interest in what I had to offer. And I was involved with people, and of course in conversation they would say, where did you learn art? Did you go to school? Did you go to college or what? And I told them I was self-taught, and just as I learned, I taught myself how to teach the visually impaired, and even though that became a spectacular thing. All these people want to invite me on TV programs, which they did, and I talked about it, and I talked about how I arrive upon certain techniques. I was on a committee that discussed how to create a barrier-free environment where people in wheelchairs, the blind, disabled are all able to go to galleries and museums and what have you and be able to get in it with no difficulty. Of course they used to just have stairs. They never had these side sort of things you could wheel up a a wheelchair and what have you, or were disabled people were able to get in there without too much difficulty. And so as it turned out, is that I was a part of this.
California has been in the avant-garde in terms of help for the disabled.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
They've been on the cutting edge in
Oh
terms
yeah,
of help for the
definitely
disabled.
And so I set up a show that were visually impaired people in wheelchair and what have you were able to get there or come into this gallery environment and be able to. It was a hands-on show that I had. That people that were always told, and especially if you're visually impaired, they tell you you can't touch the sculpture. I mean, come on. I mean, I could understand some of the ramifications of that simply because oils of the hand. But a visually impaired were able to come in and touch the sculptures that I had set up and what have you. And people in wheelchairs didn't have to try to struggle with the assistance of other people to hold them up. And so I had the things lowered to an extent where they were able to touch and everything and just wheel their wheelchair up there. And that brought a lot of satisfaction to me, And because just to see the smiles and the ooze and the twinkling of the eye, that to me it was all worth it, I mean, after all, what are we here on the earth for? We are our brother's keepers, to meet needs and so on like this. I've always believed in that, and that brought quite a bit of satisfaction to me, and so it was a joy to participate in that, and I've had so many different kind of shows, and I've been in shows where there were people from all different parts of the world participating.
I remember when I knew you over the years, I mean, you were having a show, you were averaging 2 or 3 shows a year of your work.
Right.
And you were very successful, for an artist.
Yeah, I was always working. I think I never had a vacation. I never had a vacation in years. I maybe take a couple of days or 3 days off. And even when I did go someplace, I would take a mallet and a chisel with me, I had to carve something, Oh, it was in my blood.
I would call that a real dedicated, devoted artist, a serious artist.
Oh yeah, I was serious. I was serious. I knew something was taking place, not only on the outside, but within me. And I didn't want to miss a moment of it, And it was incredible. Oh, my life just totally evolved. Not that I did have my moments, of course, everybody does. But things start evolving within me.
We were both impacted by so many, of so many California artists.
Oh yeah, it's incredible.
Big names and not with big names.
It was fantastic, and it still is fantastic. We're just shifting gears now.
You were in a show with Manuel Muri. That was in Benicia?
Yeah, in Phoenicia, yeah.
Phoenicia.
And Judy Chicago.
Yeah, right, she was in
and
the show.
Robert Arneson. It was fabulous. Fabulous, yeah. Me and my friend Gigi met a long time ago,
1980.
1980, yeah.
He taught me how to carve, but go on. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay, yeah. Well, I taught her a little bit. She really taught herself. She absorbs like a sponge. Yeah, she's a clay master. And now she's becoming a stone master. Long time, long road, And, we're not time millionaires. You got to do what you got to do. Find out what your purpose, what your direction is, Time waits for no one. No one, that's for sure, I never really looked at people that were disabled and what have you like this as being on the bottom of the totem pole or anything like this, because I definitely believe that we all have a disability of some sort, whether it be emotionally, and one thing or the other. And I always believed in treating people like people. And of course, I don't mean that by treating people like people, the fact is that you're supposed to run up and give the Boston Strangler a hug or anything like this. And that it's important to know that we're basically all on the ship together, and life is it's all about people. We're all we have, and that's extremely important. And of course, in society is designed to keep people at their lowest psychological level. So they have all these different other movies and forget we're all on this boat together. But that's another story in itself. And my approach in sharing this so-called knowledge that I have in regards to carving and so on like this, I believe in order to create communication with whomever you're sharing this knowledge with, it's important not to talk at or talk down at, but talk with, because we're just people. But I think having patience is very important. I knew in my life, as I journeyed through the various different roads of life that we all basically travel, that it takes patience was very important. I mean, there was patience that wasn't given to me, and I knew that this was an incredibly very important nutrient in order to teach and help and to bring out the best that a person has to offer within themselves that they may not even be aware of. And I had this blessing, I should say, of being able to see possibilities of what someone has, an ability of some sort. It doesn't necessarily mean that everyone should have to be a sculptor, but we get that one particular moment in time, and we stop, we focus, and we think, and we find that quiet little serenity, that moment, which sometimes comes in a blink of an eye and is gone in less than that. But if an individual has that moment to sort of reflect and to know that they are special. We're all special. Some know it, some don't. And that if you are able to give that patience and the compassion and that love to other people, it tends to draw the best out of people. Of course, some aren't ready for it, of course, We all deal with whatever issues we have in our lives. But I think that's a very important ingredient, is to have compassion. It's sometimes better to understand than to be understood.
I'd like to ask you about your experience in the Brooklyn schools.
I was sponsored by Fleet Bank. I worked in East Brooklyn and Brooklyn. And I was invited to be a role model. It broke my heart in a good way. I felt very emotionally, the very fact that they choose me to be a role model, because I've always been the people's artist. I talked to the kids, and I talked to the adults also, that were the teachers, in regards to communicating how valuable that is, and also to achieve in life. A lot of people go through life and never find what their particular talents are. And this is what I spoke about, because I know it took me a long time. If it wasn't for some very few dear friends that believed in me, such as yourself and other people, oh my goodness, I'm scared to imagine what condition I would have been in emotionally when I needed somebody when I needed somebody to believe in me, to have a chance, to get a second chance. And yeah, life is rough sometimes, you know. I grew up in a sort of rough neighborhood, you know. There was all kind of things happening as they're happening all over the world. And but having friends, having people that believe in you, that's basically what I talked about at the school. And I told the kids about being friends to the people that are in a classroom with them, to their neighbors, to listen to their mother. You know, if the mother's in focus and is cultivated a little bit or somehow, that the child will become cultivated. These were very low functioning kids, had a lot of emotional problems. They came from a lot of very dysfunctional homes. A lot of them, the mothers were on crack, and not all of them, but there were some that were, and just having a hard time in a part of the world where it's hard to kind of make ends meet, and so I was trying to convey. I wasn't talking to or at the kids. I was talking with them. There's the thing that makes the difference, you know, and it was important that in spite of, you know, whatever shortcomings everybody had, to believe that hope is the greatest thing you could give someone, even when you're teaching them, when you're talking to them, not to knock them down. They've already been knocked down far enough. It's to not discourage them, but to encourage them. And this has always been my thing. And I got this simply from my upbringing, the way I grew up, where I needed encouragement and got nothing but a lot of discouragement. And then gradually things of the puzzle start falling together, and incredible. But that was an incredible, I'll never forget that invitation to be on Role Models Day. You know, that really touched my heart.
What's the story with Child of the World?
That's something. Well, Child of the World was a very 500-pound piece of alabaster, pink alabaster. And I had made this child with a big kind of afro in a way, you know, real textured and everything like this. And his eyelids were closed. It was like almost like, it wasn't a Buddha, but it was like a heavy-set child. When I used to live in a part of California, I was renting with another friend this place. And the landlord, I created it in the backyard. And there was a lot of birds. The birds used to come over and land on it while I was taking a break and so on like that. And they became interested in it. And the squirrels used to jump on it and so on like this. And eventually, I think the only one that got sort of annoyed at it was the landlord, because it was back there. And she was wondering, when are you going to take that thing out of here? Well, you know, not everybody's into art, of course, but, you know, that's understandable. I didn't know where to put it. I had friends, but I wasn't going to burden them by storing it for me. So what I decided, I said, you know what? I'm just going to get a saw, and I'm going to cut it up into little blocks and make sculptures out of them. Little sculpture. This way it won't be in nobody's you know, way. That day, I think it was Aldrich Gallery in San Francisco called me, and they were acting as a free agent for me. There was a documentary made of my life, or some of my life, I should say, and it was viewed on a major TV station, and so Aldrich Gallery happened to, I guess, one of those people happened to see it. And Aldrich Gallery is a pretty major gallery in San Francisco. So they called me and they said there was a woman who they saw my show, and they showed them my slides, and they wanted them. And the lady who was interested, wanted to come down and see my sculptures. And I said, sure. And so she arrived and so on like this. And she belonged to a lawyer corporation in San Francisco. So she started looking around. I let her go through the house and look at other stuff. And then she come and she saw Child of the World under the plum tree. And she just fell in love with it and said, I love this. She had an accent. I love this. And she went and gave it a hug and gave it a kiss on the lips.
Kidding.
Yeah, well, close to the lips anyway. And she said, I just love this. And obviously she had been involved. She would represent judges and everything. She looked at another sculpture and kept coming back to Child of the World. And I was saying to myself, well, I appreciate her coming and looking, so I hope she hurries up, because I got to cut it up in some blocks. And I figured I could do that in almost a week or something. And I had the saw out
This
there.
is hilarious.
And everything. And she told me, how much do you want for it? People, not all people, but she asked me, how much do you want for it? But they never come back. Some do, of course, And I told her, well, I want $10,000. And she said, okay. She pulled out a checkbook. And she wrote $10,000. And I said, oh my goodness, great, And so I had it shipped out there by a mover, like move furniture and all that. So they strapped it up and
Who
they
paid
wrote.
for the moving?
She did. Yeah. And and that was the story of that. And it's up there in the
Still
Transamerican
if it's still there.
building in San Francisco. And then to my surprise, or maybe not my surprise, I had went up there to, of course, visit Child of the World and say, you have a home, a good home and everything, She was a collector of art from all over. She had Henry Moore's in there, and she had some Brancusi's, and she had some very well-known artists of the area and what have you. And that's the story of Child of the World.
You did receive a grant, a Robert Rauschenberg grant.
Yeah.
That was 98.
Yeah, in 98, I received a grant from Robert Rauschenberg.
And I know you were very delighted, very happy.
Oh, I was very, he was supportive of his fellow artists,
that you were acknowledged by one of your peers, by a fellow artist in that way.
You don't forget where you came from. And, when you happen to make some good sales and so on like this, you help your fellow artists, if you know them, not anybody, that is. Just those that have been nice and been very gracious with you when you've met them and stuff like that. That I never forget. I never forget that. I was invited also to put some sculptures or have this show. I put some sculptures into it was a conference building in Oakland, California, the convention center. And senators from Washington, D.C. and everything came down, and I was invited to do a show down there for the mayor. It was a solo exhibit for the mayor.
One artist exhibit in honor of Mayor Wilson.
Yes.
Of Oakland.
Of Oakland, yeah.
Your sculpture Reflection, the big wood piece.
Oh,
Do you want to talk about that?
Oh, sure. Well, Reflection is as if you look from the neck, I should say, the neck up and so on like this. It's part animal, and from the neck down, it's a human torso with one arm and with a head in his hand. And the story, I should say, of Reflection is it's reflecting where it's been, where it's at, and where it's going. And it's a non-sexual piece because it could pertain to any of us human beings, And it was like finding what your direction in life is. I mean, a lot of us like to kind of like focus in to what is our authentic self? What is it all about? The universal question. And this pertains to that, reflection that is, pertains to that. Finding who we really are, what our direction, what our purpose in life is. And it's sort of a diary of my life, or anyone's life, or most people's lives, I should say. And it really had a lot of, it was part of the carving of it was like peeling the onion or the calluses that build around us as we go through life and so on. And sometimes we get either a little lost as far as trying to find out, what is it, what's my purpose as an individual? What's my purpose in life? And my purpose in life, after a while, I realized was to discover who my authentic self in order to be myself 100%. And of course, we never be 100%, but we're sort of pursuing that particular goal. And it's a very interesting thing. It's like a metamorphosis of myself. I always like to say that my sculptures brought me closer to God, which is my higher self. We're all divine, I believe, and some are aware of it and some aren't. And so this is what the statement that goes with reflection is about.
I mention that because the piece, has been seen in many newspapers in California. Also, there was a picture of it in the Woodstock Times a number of years ago.
Reflection had it priced at $12K, and there was a lot of people that really admired. They loved the story, of course.
This was in California?
Yes, from the artist's perspective. And what had happened is that, I had a business agent at this particular time, and she was a good agent, believe me, very good. But this was one where we had discussed perhaps putting reflection in bronze and keeping the master, the original piece. Mm-hmm. And as it turned out, that this plastic surgeon came, and him and his wife was admiring it and saying how much they would like it, very unusual and what have you. They came into the gallery, and they asked me about it, and I told them the story as I just mentioned to you folks. And what had happened is that he and his wife wanted to just look at it, so I just kind of let them stay by themselves and discuss it and so on like this. And but me and my business agent had originally spoken and said, well, why sell the original? We could make a bronze out of it. And this way a lot of people could have copies of the bronze and so on like this. But he wanted the original. And my business agent supposedly was handling it, but what she did, she told him, well, we're going to make bronzes. We'll be in touch with you. And he said, well, I'm going to Europe, because this guy travels all over. I wanted to sell the original. Of course, everybody wants to keep the original. And but usually it's the original that people are willing to pay a good top price for. Right. And so anyway, my agent had handled, and I had mentioned to her, just sell the original, but she handled it. And I think she had a lot of good feelings about the sculpture, and that she wanted to make a copy in bronze rather than give the original. Mm-hmm. So that's what happens when you get attached to a sculpture and so on like this. Sometimes you miss a good sale, Mm-hmm. Lionel Wilson happened to be one that we happened to cross paths, and he liked what I was doing. I was doing a lot of teaching, getting kids off the street, taking them, showing how to do sculpture and what have you like this. Mm-hmm. And he liked that aspect that I was giving back to the city that had gave me so much, and so I always believed. Well, I've always considered myself the people's artist, and when I mean the people, I mean all people, not just a certain group of people. And so anyway, I was mentioned to him, and he was having a convention in the convention center in Oakland, California. And a lot of the senators from Washington, D.C., from the political circles up there, came down to participate in this convention. And I was asked, he asked the Paul Cobb, who happens to be was the director of Occur, the watchdog of the city, as I mentioned. And he mentioned my name, and if I was still doing my sculpture, if I was in town, they asked me if he could have some of my sculptures in there in the convention. So I brought some sculptures down, and I had brought a sculpture down which was called The Messenger. The other piece I had, I believe it was a representational piece. Perhaps it was a wood piece, I believe. And it had to do with a family. There were three, there were like heads, portraits, and then there was a little child in the back, and who was like a baby Buddha, in a sense. So I took that down. It's a constant, my way of saying that how important the family is, and what have you, and the family unity that's involved in life itself. And so this was my statement on that particular topic. Basically, I do art, first of all, for myself, and then I definitely do art for the people, of course, you know, because the art is a vehicle for me to be able to discover more about myself, to wonder what life's about, of course. Life, art imitates life, life imitates art, or something like that. There's some kind of connection there, you know. Perhaps I'm using the wrong description, but you know what I mean, right?
You have a current show right now going on currently
in Beacon.
At the Howland Cultural Center. It celebrates Hispanic American History Month.
Yeah. Usually people go, say, Hispanic this, or let me go to a Chinese exhibit, or this. And you would think that a lot of the things would basically be Mexicans and big hats or something like that. But in this, we had people from El Salvador, people from Puerto Rico, people from Mexico, and so on like this. And very contemporary, right on the money. Contemporary jewelry, artwork, beautiful sculptures.
A lot of diversity.
Yeah, diversity involved in this. And it was very, it's very beautiful. If you got a chance, folks, go down and see it. And I guarantee you won't forget it. Yeah. The mystery of different cultures, you know. You would think, oh, let me see. Sometimes there'll be a stereotype about certain cultures. But then you break the mystery by meeting the persons, and it changes your whole total perspective, of course.
Art,
looking at the art, talking to the artists. You know, we have had quite a lot of very well-known, internationally known artists. And
very, very accomplished artists.
Yeah, very prolific, you know, in their art. A lot of paintings, and of course the sculptures, and it's very memorable. I would say memorable, sure. Your individual styles and so on like this in art, you know, and in the sculptures, the paintings, and so on. I mean, really top grade artists there. I have one that I put into the Calling the Arts.
It's a bronze piece on a granite base.
I just like to make the people inform them that this piece was placed in there originally because they had a Native American show, and it was placed in there to hopefully help raise some money for the children on the reservation in South Dakota, which is in very dire need of trying to raise fund to help the kids and get books and reading books and pencils and crayons and all this stuff, because people are really hurting and in the lack of artistic education. Because I believe that education, not only artistic, just learning, reading, writing, and arithmetic, that's extremely incredibly important, I should say. There are people that were participating. They had paintings and so. I was probably the only sculptor there. And so my sculpture is still in the Colony Arts, and it was placed there for that particular event. This is a piece, of course, that's still in progress, and it's called Angel Within. I believe that we all basically have an angel within, and I mean, it's the good side. It's the higher self, matter of fact. And this represents that. It's symbolic of the angel within. And as I mentioned, it's a sculpture in progress. And it's made out of basswood. It's a relatively soft wood, but the thing is,
right there, I like that view a lot.
It's not just soft wood, but it's executing the idea and doing a human form. It's a very difficult one, and then also not losing your particular style and texture that you give to a sculpture.
That's really beautiful.